Welcome back to the channel, guys. Let's get straight into today's story. If you want to understand why people don't trust British politics anymore, you don't start with today's headlines. You start with Iraq. Because Iraq wasn't just a foreign policy decision. It was the moment the public realised the establishment could sell a war, dress it up as a necessity, and then shrug when the core claims fell apart. Tony Blair didn't just get it wrong. He built a case for war intelligence that wasn't solid, pushed certainty when there wasn't certainty, and tied Britain to a disaster that still shapes everything from trust in government to how we talk about intervention, immigration, terrorism and national credibility. The Iraqi inquiry later said the judgments about the threat from Iraq's weapons were presented with a certainty that was not justified. The key sales pitch was simple. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, he could use them, and the threat was urgent. The government's September 2002 dossier infamously claimed Iraq could deploy chemical or biological weapons within 45 minutes of an order. That line landed the bomb in the British media and public imagination. It created the sense Britain was minutes away from catastrophe. But Iraq wasn't an emergency sprint, it was a political campaign. A narrative was constructed to move public opinion and parliament towards a decision that had already been emotionally and strategically chosen. The most damning evidence of this is what we learned later. Blair wrote to President George W. Bush on the 28th of July 2002, telling him, "I will be with you whatever." That's months before the final rush, months before Parliament's decisive vote, and long before the public were told wars were the last resort. And here's the part that still enrages people. While the public were being told this was necessary, a huge number of Britons were in the streets saying the opposite. On February the 15th, 2003, between 1 and 2 million people marched in London against the war, the biggest protest in UK history. They were ignored completely. Then came the crunch moment in Parliament. On 18th of March 2003, MPs backed the government's motion for military action by 412 votes to 149. That wasn't some minor procurement step, that was a political point of no return, the moment Britain formally stepped into the war. Now, what was the legal basis? This is where it gets murky, and murkiness in war is not a detail. It's the whole point. The UN Security Council passed Resolution 1441 in November 2002, declaring Iraq in material breach of its obligations and warning of serious consequences if it didn't comply. But it did not explicitly authorise the invasion. That's why the legal argument became so contentious inside government. And this is where the Goldsmith issue matters. Evidence presented around the Iraq inquiry era shows that the Attorney General's view involved during early 2003 was serious debate over whether a further UN resolution was needed for war to be legal. When legal advice is shifting in the background while political certainty is being projected at the front, it tells you the machine is driving towards war even when the foundations are disputed. Now let's get to the point that ended the argument in the eyes of millions. The weapons of mass destruction stockpiles weren't there. The Iraq Survey group findings associated with the Julfa report and related testimony concluded Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs and stockpiles were not what would have been claimed in the run-up to the war. That doesn't mean Saddam was a saint, it means the central justification used to sell the war to the public did not match reality. And so what are we left with? A war launched on threat narrative that collapsed, followed by consequences that were not properly prepared for. The Iraq inquiry criticised how the UK assessed the situation, how it planned for the aftermath, and how it treated war as a choice made too early, with alternatives not exhausted. This is why Blair is so hated in certain parts of Britain to this day. Not because people expect politicians to be perfect, but because Iraq felt like betrayal. It was the moment people learned that elite confidence can be manufactured, that official certainty can be spun, and that's when the dust settles. It's ordinary people, soldiers, families, taxpayers who pay the cost. And it poisoned politics. After Iraq, every government claim is filtered through a national memory of being misled. Every trust us moment feels weaker. Every intervention debate is haunted. Even when a later government might generally be right about a foreign threat, Iraq sits there like a ghost, whispering, "Remember what they said last time." This is the real legacy, not just the war itself, but the collapse of credibility. Blair didn't just take Britain into Iraq, he took a sledgehammer to the relationship between the public and the political class. And once that trust goes, it doesn't come back with speeches or apologies. It comes back with honesty, accountability and consequences for people at the top. Iraq delivered none of that. So when you hear people say Britain feels unfixable, understand this. Iraq is a big reason why. Not the only reason, but defining one. Because it taught a brutal lesson. The system protects itself, even when it's wrong. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want more honest political commentary and don't want to miss what's really happening behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments below.